much more than I deserve. I am a biologist and a science communicator. I've been studying biology for too long, admittedly too long, also that I can teach at the prestigious University of On the Internet. And today, I'm going to be keeping things pretty light. We're going to talk just a little bit about racism, sexism, transphobia, xenophobia, and homophobia. Specifically, I'm going to be explaining why science and skepticism are more than just tools for understanding the universe. Properly applied, they are tools for compassion, for progress, and for unity as well. Let's get started. When we view the world, the whole scope of the universe, from atoms to cells, all the way to the fabric of space-time itself, we think about our place within vast systems that are billions of years old. And it provides us with unique perspectives that teach us a lot about ourselves. It provides valuable life lessons that can shape a person's view of their emotions, their relationships, their society, and even reality as a whole. So now, let me take you on a journey into my world of biology and show you how learning more about the natural world around us allows us to see beyond the superficial differences and become not just smarter, but kinder, more empathetic, and ultimately better people. We'll begin with the genus Homo, which has been around for about 2.6 million years. But our species, Homo sapiens, has been here for just around 200,000 years. Not long after our emergence in Africa, we spread rapidly across the globe, reaching the farthest point in our journey, Australia, around 50,000 years ago. For the last 50 millennia, humans have been a cosmopolitan species, putting down roots in every corner of our planet, except for Antarctica, of course, because we only got there in 1821. But we're not talking about that right now. At this time, the Earth was home to all sorts of incredible megafauna. Right here, just in North America, we had woolly mammoths, which grew to be around 12 feet tall. We also had glyptodons, which were almost as big as a Volkswagen Beetle. Early ancient people that lived in this continent used to use their shells as shelters. We also had Diprotodon, the giant wombat. By the way, these silhouettes here, it says this is a 1.8 meter tall person. I'm 1.88 meters tall at 6'2", so this silhouette here is just a little bit shorter than me, just to show you how big these guys are. There's also terror birds. This one here is called Titanus walleri. Look at the size of this thing's skull being held in someone's hands. By the way, there wasn't just one terror bird. The terror birds were a whole clade. This one is from here in North America. It stood about 2.5 meters tall. There's also one species from South America that was a whole meter taller. Also, I haven't mentioned yet one of my favorites, Arctodus, the short-faced bear. Here you can see its skull next to a grizzly bear skull there on the left. And then there's my personal favorite, Megatherium, the giant ground sloth. Look at how big this thing is. They are so cool. And it just wants to sloth about, you know? Maybe like eat a tree or a cactus or whatever. Here's a science question for you. What do you call a 4-meter long sloth? I call it a Snorlax. That's just me. And as somebody who grew up in the 90s wanting to be a Pokemon master, this is a very exciting species for me. But through it all, as we spread across the globe, as we persevered through the Ice Age, as we encountered and overcame these terrifying animals, humans were always just humans. 11,500 years ago, in a time when those giant ground sloths were leaving their giant footprints in the mud, we have evidence that children splashed and played in the puddles that those footprints created. Here you can see these human foot shapes in all different directions and depths and angles splashing around. And as we explored, we changed. We adapted to our environments, developing a suite of characteristics that we now clumsily use to classify races. But biologically speaking, races are not a real thing. Now that statement is shocking to a lot of people. As Americans especially, we're taught that race is genetic, inherent, and immutable. We can plainly see differences in skin color, eye color, hair texture, average height, so on and so on. But the truth is that the phenotypic variation within humans is simply the result of evolution. And every attempt to try to classify humans into races has historically failed. Especially the ongoing and ever-failing endeavor to invent whiteness. But y'all aren't here for that conversation today. Human variation is continuous. There is no place, genotypically or phenotypically, where one race starts and another begins, no matter what racial trait you're looking at. So-called racial characteristics vary independently from one another. We can't use one trait to reliably predict many of the other traits, and they blend between different groups all the time. And genetic variation within these so-called races is significantly greater than the variation between them. In fact, the greatest genetic diversity that we see within our entire species is in African populations. So if you want to try to claim that there's some genetic component to race, you're going to need about 24 categories for black people alone. The real story of human variation is so much more beautiful and interesting than anything that any race realist could possibly come up with. Take a look at this map of human skin color distribution. This is where we see different skin colors in ancestral populations. So we're not accounting for people immigrating from one place to another here. Now, compare that to this map of UV light saturation. Notice a pattern? You see, as humans, most humans, have a chemical in our skin called melanin. There's two types of melanin that we put on display here. This one on the left is called eumelanin. That's what looks like most everybody in this room has. This is what gives you brown to dark brown characteristics and features. Over here is pheomelanin. That is only for if you have red hair and freckles. Pheomelanin is the type of melanin that you produce. Everybody else has eumelanin to some degree or another. The more you have, the darker your hair, the darker your skin, the darker your eyes. Now, melanin, among other things, protects us from the effects of ultraviolet light radiation. So not only is this helpful with sunburns, but it also protects a really important chemical called folic acid, which is in your body and is destroyed by ultraviolet light penetrating your skin. If you don't have enough folic acid, you'll suffer from a variety of symptoms, including diarrhea, fatigue, irritability. But more importantly, if you are pregnant and don't have enough folic acid, then you're at a significantly higher risk of your baby having birth defects of the spine, spinal cord, and brain. Spina bifida is a great example of this. From an evolutionary standpoint, folic acid is very important, which means if you live in an area that is saturated with ultraviolet light, then darker skin tones are also very important. But what about people who look like me? If melanin is so important, then why am I so woefully deficient? Well, it's because my ancestors moved way up here where there isn't a lot of UV saturation, and UV light isn't only destructive. Whereas it breaks down folic acid through photodegradation, it also photochemically converts a type of cholesterol in your skin to vitamin D. Vitamin D isn't really a vitamin, it's a hormone, and it does a tremendous amount of really important things in your body. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you'll experience symptoms such as increased pain sensitivity, muscle spasms, weakness in the upper arms and legs, and more importantly, if your bones are developing while you don't have enough vitamin D, you'll end up with severe bowing of the leg, commonly known as rickets. From an evolutionary standpoint, vitamin D is very important, which means if you live in an area that isn't saturated with much UV light, lighter skin tones are also very important. Every racial characteristic you can think of has an evolutionary story like this. It's all just part of the rainbow of human variation. However, as unscientific as the concept of race is, it has a very real and very painful and very much still present effect on our history. This is important because when I was a kid, I was taught that race is a very real thing, but it doesn't matter and we shouldn't be talking about it. But when you're scientifically literate, you see that race is not real at all, but it matters a whole hell of a lot, and we should absolutely be talking about it. And this is what I meant at the beginning when I said that science gives you a new perspective. If you're a racist, you are literally upset about the effects of 100,000-year-old sunlight with no respect at all. Get the fuck over it. And yet, tribalism is abundant in our species. We are incredibly quick to separate ourselves into us and them and stoke passionate hatred against people who we've never met simply because they are wearing a different jersey. There are countless experimental examples of this sort of thing. Possibly the most famous are those of Polish social psychologist Henry Teifel. Teifel sought to explore the minimal conditions required for discrimination to occur between groups. He would start by separating people into groups based on totally arbitrary criteria, like whether they overestimated or underestimated the number of dots on a screen, or whether they had a preference for a particular painting, or even just a coin toss. And then he would ask these groups to play games against each other to see how they acted towards each other. And he found that even in these meaningless groups, even when participants knew that they were separated by the most trivial criteria possible, the participants displayed in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination. They were more likely to allocate resources like points or money in ways that favored their own group. They would even go out of their way to hurt the other group, even if that meant hurting their own group as well. They would sacrifice their own potential gain, as long as it meant that they would come out ahead of the people that they had never met and knew nothing about, other than that they were sitting over there. Findings like these have been repeatedly demonstrated countless times. No matter the situation, no matter how minimal and meaningless the criteria, humans form in-group biases with minimal provocation. And this in-group, out-group mentality contributes to a lot of real-world issues, like political divides, conspiracy theories, racial and gendered prejudice, even when we know that the divisions between these groups are superficial and arbitrary. Another experiment at the University of California, Irvine, had pairs of strangers playing a rigged game of Monopoly. The players knew that the game was rigged. The toss of a coin determined one player who started with twice as much money. They got to roll twice as many dice. They collected twice as much money every time they passed go. And yet, even though they knew that the game was rigged, even though they knew their luck was arbitrary, the players who were winning based on totally arbitrary things, totally none of their own ability whatsoever, they would become arrogant. They would smack their pieces down against the board. They would boast about their wealth, and they would laugh at the other player's lack of skill. We see this phenomenon played out today as well, when people who are born and raised in positions of privilege repeatedly see the equality of other people as oppression against them.
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't think it's fair.
So sorry, for some reason we have this issue where the first second of our sound is cut off. He's asking, do you think that homosexual couples should have the same rights as heterosexual couples?
Is that?
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't think it's fair.
To the gay couple?
Well, no, but the regular couple, they work so hard, you know, and the gay couple, they want more.
When you say more, do you mean equal?
Yeah, they want equal.
And that's just too much.
This seems bleak, but it has a serious upside. Discriminatory behavior is extraordinarily easy to trigger, but the lines are also extraordinarily easy to draw and redraw as many times as you want. Think of the feelings that you have towards your own family. How far do those feelings extend? Understanding the origins and the diversity of our species helps us to realize that when we're saying we're all a family, that isn't just a saying. It is biological reality. And if you can think of all of humanity as your family, you will be shocked at how quickly it changes the way you treat even the most distant stranger, and how difficult it is for you to be provoked into tribalistic thinking and behavior. Understanding science precludes racist and tribalistic thinking. It makes you a better person. When I teach this lesson, it's easy to forget that I have this perspective because of my understanding of the data. But what about when we don't have the data? What about if there's a lot of data that we're missing? Let's talk about feminism for a second. When we talk about feminist thinking or the disparity between sexes, people are often genuinely shocked by just how many things we are actually talking about. We're going to cover a few things tonight, but we'll start with one of my fields, bioanthropology. When we're doing archaeology, whether we're saying ancient members of our species or was one of our ancestral species or whatever, we have a bad tendency to assume that every single person is a male. And every action ever taken was taken by a man. And we only change our minds in the face of strong evidence for the existence of women. And sometimes even then, we still don't change our mind. Here's a shocking fact that I'm about to pile a lot of stuff on. Feminist archaeological theory, which is, in layman's terms, the interpretation of archaeological data through the lens that women have been here the whole time, and that they did, get this, things. Feminist archaeological theory was only developed in the late 1970s. Until then, and quite a bit after then, we always assumed that human evolution was more or less driven by men. After all, we know that meat eating, for example, played a huge role in the evolution of our species, and men are the ones that hunt, right? But then we started finding burial sites like this. This is a grave of a roughly 19-year-old anatomical female located in the Andean highlands of Peru. This person was buried with stone projectiles and several stone tools used for processing meat. This is very clearly, in the cultural context of this region, the grave of a hunter. And if there had been a male skeleton in that grave, we would not have questioned that. But because this is the grave of a female, there is still public debate about what these artifacts mean. Another example, the tomb of the Burka warrior. This person was buried with a full set of weapons, including a sword, a spear, a shield, an axe, arrows, a map for military strategy, and 2 horses which were sacrificed and buried along with them in their honor. This grave is found around 1,100 other tombs identified in this same settlement, and it is one of the only 2 that contained a full set of weaponry like this, and it's marked with a large and very conspicuous boulder. This is very clearly the grave of a high-ranking member of the community, a great and well-respected warrior. It was discovered in 1878, and for over 100 years, because of the contents of this grave, it was assumed that the person lying inside of it is a male, despite the fact that the skeleton is female. It wasn't until 2017 that ancient DNA testing of the bones in the grave demonstrated that this person was, in fact, not possibly chromosomally male. And funny enough, shortly after that study was completed, people started to propose interesting new ideas about the many weapons contained within the grave and how they might not have indicated the life of a warrior, but were in fact perhaps symbolic. Or maybe the graves were just mixed up by mistake. You know, when you have a grand funeral for a very high-ranking member of the community, a high military officer, and you fill it with weapons and you sacrifice horses and then you just dump a woman in there accidentally. We've all been there, right? It happens. Now, at this point, this sort of thing is old news. There are countless reports like this. Modern research has consistently shown that the myth of male hunters and female gatherers in prehistory is just that. It is a myth. In one monumental study, women were shown to have been hunters in roughly 80% of the surveyed forager societies. And as far as warrior women were concerned, look no further than the Scythians. DNA testing of Scythian skeletons buried with weapons in more than 1,000 burial mounds across Central Eurasia showed that at least 37% of Scythian women were active warriors. Compare that to the United States today, where less than 1% of men serve in the military. This problem extends into our culture today. Speaking about female warriors, how about we all go play a video game where the male fighters look like this and the female fighters look like this? My brothers in not Christ, what the hell is this? This one's my favorite. This is from a video game called Metal Gear Solid 5. That is the main character, Solid Snake, standing there on the left. Next to his sniper friend, the sniper is named Quiet. They named the woman Quiet. By the way, they're both in a war zone. These two people showed up for the same job, and that job is being shot at with bullets. And she showed up in a bikini and ripped pantyhose. Makes sense. But that's sexism just from a cultural perspective. Looking at this from a scientific perspective, all we have to do is look at the data, or more specifically, the lack of data. Women aren't adequately represented in medical testing. We often use male cells in labs for drug testing and learn how the drug will affect female cells later on, sometimes just when we distribute the drug. Before 1993, women were rarely even included in clinical trials. The first study testing the absorbency of menstrual products using blood was published in the British Medical Journal's Journal of Sexual and Reproductive Health in August of 2023. So August 2 years ago was the first time we put blood on a tampon to see what would happen. You wonder why you need to buy freaking supers all the time? It's because those are designed for water. And here's a biological fact for you. Water isn't freaking blood. Crash test dummies are modeled after average male bodies. We didn't even start using smaller dummies to represent women until 2011. And notice I said smaller dummies, not dummies modeled after average female bodies, just male dummies shrunk. So the weight distribution is all wrong, which is part of the reason why women are 73% more likely to be severely injured and 17% more likely to die in a car crash, because the safety features of cars are not designed for you. To this day, there's still a major bias towards male bodies in medical textbooks. Can we advance, please? It would be really cool if we could do the next one. There we go. With only small sections of our medical textbooks dedicated to female-specific anatomy. And when it comes to female reproductive anatomy, even in medical schools, we still have to deal with the taboo of teaching about or even naming female-specific anatomical structures. Case in point, the clitoris was first mapped by Australian urologist named Helen O'Connell. Do you want to guess when? 2005 was the first time we finally actually mapped a very important organ and put it in a textbook.
Did we find it?
We did. We did. Love that. Let's see if I can get this back. Give me just 1 second. I'm so sorry. And since we already talked about racism, by the way, don't even get me started on the ongoing struggle to get black people represented in medical textbooks, by the way. Rashes look different on different skin colors, y'all. That's a tough one. Mm-hmm. When you learn about archaeology and early human history and how gender and sex were understood by cultures across time and space, you find out that it's a lot easier to break out of the heuristics of our male-centric culture. For this and so many other reasons, understanding science precludes sexist thinking. It makes you a better person. Now, you'll notice that during the last segment, I often use the word female rather than women. There's a reason for this. The reason is that sex and gender are different things. While I have evidence for the sex of these ancient peoples, I don't always have evidence for their genders. For clarity, sex refers to the anatomical and physiological phenotype of males, females, and intersex people. Gender refers to the socially constructed behaviors and characteristics of women, men, girls, boys, and non-binary people. One's gender needs not coincide with one's sex. Unfortunately, like climate change and to some extent evolution as well, the science of sex and gender has become a politicized issue, especially recently. People like to pretend that intersex, transgender, and non-binary people are a new phenomenon that is suddenly being thrust upon the world in the last few years. But that's simply not the case. Consider, for example, this map of gender-diverse cultures. Every one of those pins represents an example of a culture which recognizes more than two genders and or transgender individuals, and always has. Among the Savakala in Madagascar, people known as the Sakrata are assigned male at birth, but raised as girls and lived their lives dressing as women, wearing their hair long and in decorative knots, wearing jewelry. These are not transgender people. This is a third separate gender option. Among the Aboriginal Australians, third gender people are commonly known as sister girls, who are assigned male at birth but live as women, or brother boys assigned females at birth and live as men. There are dozens of third gender traditions across indigenous cultures here in North America, many of which adopt the blanket term two-spirit. The Abenaki people even incorporate third gender or transgender people into their creation story, with the great hero Glooskap shooting an arrow at an ash tree, splitting it into two pieces, and when the split spirit of the tree agreed to become people, Glooskap breathed life into it, and one half of the tree became the first man, the other half became the first woman, and the little bit of essence left in the stump became the first two-spirit person, who was both masculine and feminine. Or how about some specific examples, like Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who ruled the Roman Empire around 218 AD. She regularly wore makeup and wigs, demanded to be referred to as a lady rather than a lord, referred to herself as a queen, not a king, and offered great sums of money to any doctor who could change her into a female. And for this reason, some museums have even begun rewriting plaques and information about her using she, her pronouns, as she was presumably a transgender woman. Or what about Chevalier d'Édon, a celebrated French diplomat, soldier, and spy who fought in the 7 Years' War? Although she was assigned male at birth, she lived openly as both a man and a woman at different times in her life, which grew much public attention at the time. At one point, she infiltrated the Russian court by presenting as a woman, and starting in 1777, she began to live permanently as a woman and was officially recognized as a woman by King Louis XVI. So, gender is a diverse and interesting thing. Because it is culturally constructed, it is, by its very definition, not a binary system. But sex isn't a strict binary either. Sex is a multivariate system with lots and lots of different factors and mechanisms playing into it, from chromosomes to genes to hormones to internal genitalia to external genitalia, not a single one of which has only two options, by the way. And the result is a gradient of phenotypes, a spectrum of sex upon which most of us fall pretty close to the poles, but some of us don't. The UN estimates that around 1.7% of the global population is intersex. And 1.7% may seem trivial until you remember that 1.7% of 8 billion people is 136 million people. That's a population the size of Russia. Imagine the mental gymnastics you have to do as an educated person to say that we live in a world where there are only males and females and Russians. But that's okay, because the Russians are just anomalies, and we don't talk about the Russians, all right? And of course, let's not forget that over 99.9% of all the atoms in the universe are either hydrogen or helium. The other 116 elements occur at a significantly lower rate than intersex people do. And yet somehow, we don't consider the periodic table a strict and immutable binary. In my field of biomedical science, when we're talking about a male body in class, we are very careful to say whether we're talking about an anatomical male, or a phenotypic male, or a genetic male, or a chromosomal male, or a hormonal male, because none of these necessarily implies all of the others, and not a single one of them means the same thing as man. And when you add that gender into the mix, it becomes a whole hell of a lot harder to boil people down and cram them into discrete boxes. And none of this even touches on the concept of sexuality, with homosexuality being portrayed as another recent development which is on the rise due to its increased social acceptance. You know, like how we're all left-handed now. But of course, the issue is that we've observed homosexual behavior in over 1,500 animal species. If any other trait were found to be as ubiquitous as homosexuality, it would likely be assumed to be an ancestral characteristic dating back to some of the earliest animal lineages. The idea that homosexuality arose separately and accidentally in so many different species only makes sense from a heteronormative perspective, where heterosexual behavior is seen as the natural default and homosexuality is viewed as some anomaly that needs to be justified. Shifting the focus back just to humans, the belief that LGBT people are some recent aberration which are biologically separate from cisgender heterosexuals, rather than being a part of the complex and diverse spectrum of anatomy, chromosomes, and behaviors which are often oversimplified as sex and sexuality, exemplifies the kind of dualistic, Eurocentric thinking that impedes both social progress and scientific discovery. But understanding science precludes transphobic and homophobic thinking. It makes you a better person. The core of all of the messages that I've shared today so far is skepticism. Whether we're talking about racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, you name it, the one thing that ameliorates all these issues and paves the way to progress is the willingness to question our assumptions, to evaluate new evidence, and to remain open to new ideas, even when they challenge our most deeply held beliefs. Despite the provocatively and unfortunately political nature of this talk so far, this shouldn't be new, especially not to anyone here. This is the way that science has always progressed. We used to think that life was stagnant and hierarchical. Then we discovered things like fossils, and we accepted evolution. It completely changed everything we knew about life, but the truth was worth it. We used to think that the universe was eternal, and then we discovered things like the recession rates of galaxies, and we accepted the Big Bang model. It completely changed everything we thought we knew about the entire universe, but the truth was worth it. This is supposed to be the point of skepticism. But I feel compelled to say this because I find that some people in the skeptic community believe that skepticism is simply the eternal stance of disagreeing, and that the more positive and popular and progressive an idea, the more skeptical you are when you disagree with it. The more important it is to tell everyone how wrong it is, and the more people you offend, the better of a skeptic you are. But skepticism isn't just doubting for the sake of doubting. It's approaching the world with a healthy sense of inquiry. It's asking how we know what we know, and being willing to change our minds even when doing so is really freaking uncomfortable. Skepticism is not just a philosophy, and it's not just a skill. It is a way of thinking and a way of living. Properly applied, it should foster more than just curiosity and open-mindedness, but a commitment to both personal growth and social justice as well. In my opinion, if you are thinking critically about this world, you should not be able to tolerate the world the way it is. Let me illustrate what I mean with a brief story. Famed neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky once reported on a group of olive baboons called the Kikurok troop, which he observed for many decades. The baboons were exactly what you would expect from a group of baboons. The group was highly socially stratified. The big, strong males were absolute terrors to all of the weaker males and the females alike. Then one day, the troop went foraging for food at a local tourist lodge, and they found a bunch of meat in a dumpster because it had been tainted with tuberculosis. And who do you suppose got to eat the meat first? It was all the big, strong males that pushed their way to the front. And as a result, about half the males in the troop died. Practically overnight, this troop, which was now predominantly female, and the males that were left were the ones that had devoted their time to social behaviors like grooming. Now, you might expect that these low-level males would now rise up and become the new alpha males, but that isn't what happened at all. The troop remained peaceful. Those who weren't willing to be social were the ones that died off, not the ones that were less dominant. And even when new adolescent males would enter into the troop acting just as brash and aggressive as any adolescent male in any other group, they were knocked down several pegs very quickly by their peers. After about 6 months, they had fully assimilated into the new lifestyle, and this new culture persisted within this troop for over 20 years. All I'm saying is that if a bunch of baboons can eat some fetid meat and revolutionize their society on accident, then maybe we as humans can utilize the scientific understanding provided by the best data we have to make this world a better place for everybody on freaking purpose. That's my whole idea. As we embark on this journey to understand and ameliorate the complexities of human experience and identity, it's crucial to recognize that there is no single aspect of who we are that exists in isolation, be it race, gender, sex, sexuality, whatever. I included all these different aspects of human identity together in this single discussion because they exist together. They interact in ways that shape both our perspectives of ourselves and our experiences with one another in unique and profound ways. And for that reason, these lessons are infinitely more powerful and immeasurably more useful when they are taken and considered together as well. When you approach this understanding through this intersectional lens, when you see how these threads and systems overlap and how they affect different individuals in unique ways, and by understanding these intersections, we can begin to advocate in a more nuanced way for more effective solutions to social issues, ensuring that our efforts towards equity are both comprehensive and inclusive, and that we are studying science in a way that makes the world a genuinely better place for everyone. And that is what studying science compels me to do. We've covered a lot of profound things today, but the one thing that ties it all together is that it's all about humans. This bizarre, mostly hairless species of great ape with poorly structured pelvises and dumb, non-opposable big toes and weird, tiny little mouths. But despite the fact that we are laughably inbred as a species, there's a lot of diversity among human populations around the world. And that diversity can seem threatening to people who struggle to think outside of their own backyard. Hatred and xenophobia plagues our global civilization, stifling progress and impeding unity. But we humans are a remarkable bunch. We outlived all of those extraordinary creatures that I mentioned earlier, as well as all the other hominin species, scraping by the skin of our teeth from time to time. We've learned how to manipulate our environments. We've learned how to cultivate our food. We've learned how to establish remarkable levels of social order, even though we regularly fail at all of those things as well. No matter the circumstances, we explore and probe our surroundings. We find patterns where there aren't really patterns. We find meaning where there isn't really meaning. And we find hope where there could not have been hope otherwise. We take big chances, we make big mistakes, we get very, very messy. And most of all, we care for each other. And it's because of those qualities that we've survived long enough to launch ourselves and our machines out into interplanetary space. And what we found up there is what speaks the most to me. In 1977, we launched a spacecraft called Voyager 1. This is one of the most famous spacecrafts in history because it contained one of the golden records. Among other things, these phonographic records contain audio recordings of the sounds of Earth, audio recordings which have been digitized and are available through nasa.gov, and I'll play some for you today. Recordings include the sounds of mud pots bubbling, the sounds of rain and thunder, in one bizarre track, we hear wind, footsteps, a heartbeat, and laughter. Terrifying. They also contain greetings in 55 different languages, starting with Sumerian, which makes sense because writing began with Sumerian as well. Please. Can I get the Sumerian, please? As well as Arabic. Let's go for Arabic. Goodness. Try again. Czech. German.
Herzliche Grüße an alle.
Japanese. Hindi.
धरती के वासियों की ओर से नमस्कार.
Hebrew.
Shalom.
Urdu. And you don't. Punjabi. Come on, Punjabi. We have a weird audio syncing issue. I'm so sorry for the mess up here. See if I can get this to work for you. Mandarin. Latin.
Salvete quicunque estis.
Zulu.
Siyani bingalela makawe.
Turkish.
Sayın Türkçe bilen arkadaşlarımız sabah
Thai.
สวัสดีค่ะสหายนายธรณีพลพวกเราในธรณี
Spanish.
Hola y saludos a todos.
And English.
From the children of planet Earth.
All voices from around the globe simply saying hello. Also included are messages from 15 UN delegates, which turned out to be so long-winded and self-important that they would not fit on the records. And so they take the form of a mashup of random chunks of random sentences that make very little sense, and that makes me very happy. The records also contain music from all around the world, from a Bach concerto, a Navajo chant, bagpipes from Azerbaijan, and my personal favorite, Melancholy Blues. Also aboard the Voyager records, packed away in analog form, were images. Images of what we know. Images of where we are. Images of what we're made of. Images of how we live. And images of what we do. These messages were all included in the hope that someday, long after the people who sent it were gone, maybe even long after all of us were gone, some alien civilization might find it and learn a little bit more about us, and perhaps even follow the included map back here in time to say hello themselves. But the Voyager wasn't just a communication mission. It also collected a tremendous amount of data for us as well as it flew past the outer planets. On the 14th of February 1999, as it was flying through space around 4 billion miles, or 6.4 billion kilometers away, it turns itself around and took it, what is, in my opinion, the most important picture ever taken. Here, caught in the center of scattered lens flares, is the Earth. A tiny blue pinpoint of light, a little over 1/10 of a pixel in size. The more important part of this image to me is what isn't included, which is anything else. There's a lot that I would like to say about this image, but Carl Sagan already said it. Upon seeing this image, he wrote, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. the aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged place in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. I said at the beginning that looking through the lens of science grants us the ability to look beyond superficial differences that have divided humanity for centuries. I hope with this image more than anything else, you can see what I mean. By understanding the evolution of human variation, we realize that race is not a biological reality, but a social construct that has been used to justify unfounded hatred and inequality. By understanding social psychology, we remember to be cautious of just how easy it is to fall into the trap of us versus them thinking. And we highlight the importance of recognizing our shared humanity. When we learn about the pervasive sexism in science and society alike, we're compelled to advocate for fairness and equality, ensuring that every person is heard and valued. Understanding the distinction between sex and gender and the historical existence of trans and non-binary identities across time and space challenges us to expand our definition and embrace the diversity of human experience. Similarly, recognizing homosexuality in nature broadens our perspective of what is so-called normal, teaching us that diversity in love is as old as love itself. And when we take a step back and look at our tiny, fragile planet, juxtaposed with the vast emptiness of space, we are reminded of our shared responsibility to treat each other with kindness, respect, and compassion. Science teaches us to question, to explore, and to understand. It breaks down barriers of ignorance and fear, replacing them with knowledge and empathy. Understanding science precludes hateful, tribalistic, xenophobic, and myopic thinking. It gives you a broader perspective. It gives you a deeper purpose. Through learning science, we learn to see the world and each other with clearer eyes and kinder hearts. It's not just about understanding the world. It's about becoming better stewards of it and better caretakers to the people within it. We are one species. We are on this one planet, and we have this one chance to get this shit right. So as we continue to learn and grow today and long afterwards, let us remember to be more curious, more compassionate, and ultimately, more human. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for listening to me for the whole hour. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. I do believe we had talked about maybe doing a Q&A session really quickly. I've got some time. Is that still something you want to do? She seems into it. Okay.
Could you speak into the microphone, so if you want to ask some questions, raise your hand. Nobody?
I should be able to. There we go. I've got this one. Yeah, sure. Mike, do your thing.
I don't think it's on.
It's not. So,
Is it? Okay. Make sure the switch is on the side. Now it is. That's helpful. Might have got turned off on it. So you can hear me now?
no.
Nobody. I'll speak up.
Ah.
I'm going to ask a different question than I asked you over there now because I have different thoughts. So my daughter's finishing her second and final year at CU, anthropology.
Into the microphone.
Yes.
The microphone is messing up. We don't know.
So, in her anthropology degree, 4.0. So she's thinking about bioanthropology as the next step.
Yeah.
But she's not sure. So that's kind of like what's your feeling? Obviously, you just said it was there, so you changed my question.
Yeah.
Why is like that most important for you?
So my first master's was in bioanthro, and it was because I wanted to know more about where we came from and also like what it actually means to be a human. So what's important to remember is that anthropology is divided up differently in different parts of the world. Here in the US, it's broken up into 4 fields, and those are biological anthropology, which is studying human biology and evolution, cultural anthropology, studying, you guessed it, cultures, linguistic, which is studying language, and then archaeology, which is just digging things up and figuring out what's going on. Different parts of this are going to have different aspects that are artsy versus sciencey. So for me, I focused on bioanthro, especially zooarchaeology, especially what we call paleoecological reconstruction, very much on the science side. But I did take time to study some archaeological theory and learn a little bit about post-processual understandings of what humanity has looked like throughout history, what it meant to be a person in different cultures at different times. That's super important. So if she is into evolution, primatology, into learning more about human interactions with the environment, very, very cool. If you want more of a sciencey thing and you're focused on humans specifically, biomedical science was my second master's, and it is just the science of humans today. As well as you still get that evolutionary component because there's so much in there about development. So I would encourage looking into both.
Kind of leaning towards the second.
Looking into biomed?
More cultural.
More cultural. Cultural's super cool. And the thing is with cultural anthropology, it's not just taking notes on what people are wearing today, who's wearing what beads, things like it's there's a tremendous amount of deep meaning to be found there. So I would encourage you to do it. It's incredibly cool. Hello.
I presume your presentation was created before the current.
Yeah.
We are now in a society where the leaders, quote unquote, are openly anti-science. Where a leader said they want to prevent the dilution of the white original European stock. That's the quotation in the United States, which means to keep out every other non-looking like white out of here. And we live on a world where about 2 billion with a B belong to the Judeo-Christian religion, where people believe in the origin of the book called the Bible, where God created a man and a woman. So this is all very painful. You sit there, so what the hell can I do?
So, yes, there's been a few changes since I wrote this, and I tried to include it a little bit, but yeah, there have been some pretty significant changes. Number one is that from the pulpit of the presidential podium, on Inauguration Day, Donald Trump declared that there are only two genders, male and female. So we've conflated sex and gender together. And now all of a sudden, not only transgender people, but intersex people don't exist legally in this country. And also, we now have a dangerous legal precedent to say that if sex and gender are established at conception, then so is humanity and personhood, and therefore now we have abortion legislation coming through. We also, you're correct, have now been talking a lot about immigration and how we want to get rid of all these immigrants. They mean brown people. They also, very recently, have now established an office of faith or something that we now have for the first time. There is no such thing as separation of church and state, and the person who's been put in charge of that is a woman who has said that to disobey Trump is to disobey God. I am not one to mince words. That's Nazi shit. That's Nazi shit. And there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, you woke leftists, everything you don't like is Nazis. No. I say Nazi shit when people are acting and talking and goose-stepping like Nazis. If it walks like a duck and it sig heils like a duck, it's a fucking Nazi. So for me, what we can do about this, the biggest things for me, check out a book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. It's a very small little book. You can fit it in your pocket unless you wear women's pants. You can read it in a day. It's a great little read. And it covers a lot of really important things that is no different than what I would tell you right now. Number one is you need to trust and defend institutions. We need to be sticking up for the National Academy of Sciences. We need to be sticking up for the National Institute of Health. We need to be sticking up for the National Science Foundation, which paid my way through grad school and funded my research. And now you are not allowed to submit a grant, or rather your grant will be automatically rejected if it includes the word female. Or woman, or non-binary, or trans, or intersex, or LGBT, or anything else. Like, we are demolishing science, erasing evidence, destroying data in order to fit the hateful, myopic, and just freaking stupid ideology of a small cluster of very fascistic people. So what you can be doing is supporting these institutions, calling your representatives and telling them how much you're not going to vote for them anymore. I live in Oklahoma, which is a bad place. And my representative, Senator James Lankford, I called him literally every single day for 6 months, asking him to take action on the genocide in Palestine. He did one thing, which was that he put out tried to pass a bill criminalizing the words "from the river to the sea," while tens of thousands of people were being murdered in their homes, while refugee camps were being bombed, while hospitals were being leveled. His priority was mean words. And I called this man every single day for 6 months. The one time I ever got a response back was when I said, I swear if I don't get a response from you, I am going to change my party affiliation to Republican so I can vote against you in the primaries. And I'm going to go knocking door to door for anybody who runs against you, no matter how much I hate them. I will do everything in my power to make sure you lose your freaking office, you monster. Then I got a letter. So, call your reps and tell them you're going to take away the one thing that they love, which is attention and power. That is the best advice I can give to you. Also, corporeal activism, showing up physically to protest, is so much more powerful than anything you can spread online. And when you show up physically to protest, don't touch the bricks. No company that does construction in the world is ever going to leave piles of freaking bricks on the side of the road. Those are there to get you to act stupid so they can discredit you. Look up Umbrella Man back with Black Lives Matter protests back in 2020. A white supremacist who dressed up in all black carried an umbrella and smashed windows in order to start violence and discredit the entire movement. Those are called agent provocateurs. They're very common. You need to make sure that you are always safe, helpful, and nonviolent. And if anybody dresses like you, talks like you, and acts like you in order to try to convince you to be not safe, not helpful, and not nonviolent, that's a freaking Fed. So walk away from them. That's what you can be doing to help. Remain calm when when the unthinkable comes, and do your best to fight like hell for the people in this world that need to be defended and protected. That is what you should be doing.
I have a quick.
Yes. We got two. Sorry?
How many more?
Let's do this. We have 1, 2, 3 questions I see right
We
here.
have one back here who's been waiting.
Let's do 4 of them.
Okay.
You were talking about research, and I am something called a Jerry educator, and we're working with medical students to somewhat train them how to work better with older adults.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
I just wanted to mention that we're working with a little bit with research.
Yeah.
I'm also an older adult research specialist.
It's amazing. There's a tremendous amount. So like I said, right now my work is in biomedical science, and geriatric care and geriatric medicine, geroprotection, especially in the new and emerging field of epigenetics, is freaking huge. So yes, absolutely. A beautiful new form of medicine, beautiful new thing we're learning about. What's up?
Thank you. First of all, yes, please support the NSF, because...
Holy crap, support the NSF.
Yeah, because I'm trying to apply for my postdoc grant right now, and we got delayed because of that, so super fun. I think still with anthropology, because I work in a field where we still do this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I work in arachnology, and
nice.
we still say New World and Old World for spiders. Super great. But I know. It's not my fault.
We do the same thing with monkeys.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. When I was an undergrad, they did that in my physical anthropology class, and I think that's an issue. So I have proposed this with entomology, stopping doing that. Arachnology is a little bit easier. But even within the sciences, these issues still exist, especially as, that progress is made one grave at a time thing happens.
Yep.
So what are you, it's true. What are your suggestions for trying to rectify even some of the language we use ourselves in research and in education?
Yeah, it's really difficult because with an anthropology, so all my undergrad work was mainly in evolution, and so having these outdated terms like New World and Old World was a big thing. Then getting into anthropology, especially physical anthropology, is a long, dark history of messing up really bad. There's a reason why a lot of places don't even use physical anthropology anymore. They say biological anthropology in order to distinguish it from the idiots who did phrenology. In a lot of biology, especially in medicine now, the words like hysteria, you know what I mean? Hysteria comes from the word for uterus. There's a hysterectomy, to remove a uterus, right? So if you're acting crazy, you're acting like someone with a uterus. So these very outdated terms. I can tell you in anthropology, when I was focused there, there was still a lot of discussion on terms like trying to get away from first world, second world, blah, 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 and talking about developing versus underdeveloped, as opposed to civilized or whatever. There's a lot of debate and discussion. I don't have any suggestions personally that are better than anybody else's. Cannot stress this enough. I am the whitest person you've ever met. And so it's difficult for me to put myself in these shoes and come up with a meaningful suggestion. But from what I can understand, this is still an ongoing discussion that is hopefully in the So I was going to say hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years. Considering the 20 years we're about to be set back, hopefully in the next century, we should be able to recover and do away with this kind of language. I don't know anything beyond what you probably already know as far as where that discussion is right now. Yeah, I'm sorry. I haven't heard anything different, is what I'm saying. I think we had one more here, and then I think someone was raising their hand over here, and then I think that'll be we have time for.
It's more of a rhetorical question.
Oh, two. Pardon me. You go first.
It's more of a rhetorical question based on what you said, like, what am I to do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you maintain empathy and equality in spite of everything that's been going on very recently?
The same way that I would recommend doing it on the atheist call-in shows and stuff that I do is to remember that people are not born with hate or prejudice. These things are constructed for us and always by someone who has something to gain from our fear. And especially, when we talk about religion, especially I talk about Christians all the time, this is an ideology that is based in trauma. It is based in abuse. And so understanding that this person is coming from a background of abuse, they've been taught that this abuse is good, and now they are going to continue on this moral good, gives you a lot of compassion for this person. And it's real easy to sound condescending when you say that, and I don't mean it. Condescending means that you're explaining something like this. Sorry. So But it's really easy to sound condescending when you say this, but honestly, like that kind of mentality helps a lot. And when you're talking to people who are coming from like a far right position, this especially does sound condescending. I have yet to meet somebody who is real mad about things like socialism or wokeness or whatever that can also define these terms. These are everlasting thought stoppers, the same kind as God's ways are higher than your ways is, oh, you like abortion, you want to kill babies. It's just something to stop you from thinking, and they're trapped in that. And so being helpful rather than disciplinarian is really important when dealing with people, and when dealing with politicians, it's exactly the opposite. You should be screaming at them and holding them every bit of accountable. You.
I was just wondering about the baboon troop. When is it evolutionarily appropriate for me to poison a bunch of toxic men?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm legally able to answer that. However, I can tell you that there's actually studies into toxic masculinity that show that men in our culture that are grown up this way are more likely to take major risks with their bodily and physical health, to smoke, to abuse drugs and alcohol, to get into fights. And while they are the perpetrators of a lot of violence, they are also the victims of a lot of violence, which they fail to report. So, as callous as it sounds, that problem will work itself out if you're Sorry. What's up?
Hi. I understand that an us versus them mentality is a slippery slope.
Yes.
But do you ever think it's justified? Because as a communist, I can't help but view the world as us, the proletariat, versus them, the bourgeoisie.
Yeah. So Marxist archaeological theory was a big impact on me as well. And I tend to look at the entirety of human history this way, through struggle and class struggle, especially in oppression. It is useful, I would say, this kind of thinking is useful when you are trying to change things, when someone is strongly trying to, how should I say this? Rights are never given, they are taken. If you wait for rights to be given, then you are in the obsequious position of hoping that someone will someday recognize you as a human. Rights are taken. And that is where that kind of us versus them mentality is useful. When someone has their boot on your neck, they are a them. However, it's important when framing ideas about how you want the world to be a better place and how you are going to resist tyranny and how you are going to stand up for your fellow human, that you keep that us mentality at all times. Because otherwise, as Nietzsche said, you will fight monsters until you become a monster. Because as you stare into the abyss stares back into you. So do not become a monster while you're fighting the monsters. That's where the us mentality works. You know what I'm saying? That's how I see it anyway. My last question of the night, and then I am going to proceed to going away.
The previous question kind of touched upon what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
I'm a retired government civics history type person.
Nice.
Can you first give me I guess a descriptor of what form of government you think is most effective in reaching these goals that we've talked about tonight? And second, one of the themes I heard throughout was tribalism. And the theory, I guess I'm going to call this a theory behind this, the history, the science behind it, now is thrown into real world, today, contemporary society. What can we do, and maybe this is more of a thought question, to reduce the tribalism? Because that seems to be the catalyst for just about every social issue or every divisive issue we have in our society today.
Yeah. So we live in a capitalist hellscape. And I am not a capitalist. I'm a socialist myself and also very much an anarchist. And that doesn't mean I just want everybody to be free to do whatever the hell they want and hurt whoever. That's individualistic anarchism. I like social anarchism, which is the idea that equality and liberty are intertwined in an inextricable way. That's a whole other thing. That comes from my anthropology background. Don't worry about any of that. The point is that we live in a capitalist hellscape. And because of that, people in the world that we live in, especially here in this country, are very selfish. But looking at people living under capitalism and assuming that it is human nature to be selfish is like looking at people who are underwater and saying that it is human nature to drown. This is the result of the world that we live in and the way that we are forced to behave. So, for me, the best kind of government, as Thoreau said, the best government is that which governs least, and the even better government is that which governs not at all. Would be in a civilization where humans don't need this kind of thing because we know to take care of each other well, and that systems of power are put in place in order to benefit society, and if they cannot continuously, every second of every day, justify their existence, they are dismantled. That's my idea of a good society, and that is an idea that is, as has been often said, begging for the impossible. It's a very, very distant dream. I am a quixotic person, if nothing else. So, as far as how we reach people and how we kind of get to these kinds of things, when we look at the driving forces behind political rhetoric in this country, in just the way from my frame, I'm not a political analyst by any means. I would not want to be a part of a politics club that would have someone like me as a member. But when we look at the rhetoric, a lot of the rhetoric from the right is groceries and rent, and a lot of the rhetoric from the left is civil rights and equality. And a lot of people who are struggling with groceries and rent see civil rights and equality as a secondary issue. How am I going to care about the rights of LGBT people if I cannot eat? Now, it just so happens that groceries and rent get a whole hell of a lot worse with these right-leaning policies, but that's not the point of the sale, right? What I think is important to point out is that we learned in freaking kindergarten that humans need food, water, shelter, and medicine to survive. So any social system that guarantees and protects these things is going to be a whole hell of a lot more attractive to people, everyday, common people, the poors, right, who need these things. And the secondary question is always who's paying for them? Well, who's paying for all the damn bombs as well, right? No one ever asked that question when we're talking about building more tanks. Nobody ever asked that question when we're talking about tax breaks for the rich. Nobody ever asked that question when we're talking about building a new stupid golf course. Nobody ever asked that question when we're talking about flying flags all over the place. Nobody ever asked that question when we're talking about spreading democracy, no matter how many bombs it takes to spread it. Nobody ever asked those questions for those things. They only ask who's going to pay for it when we're talking about taking care of individual, ordinary Americans. And that is where I think the conversation needs to lie. Why do we have enough money to make sure we have military bases all over the world if we do not have enough money to make sure that every single kid in this country has a good education? Why do we have enough money to make sure that the top 1% can become the top 0.1% if we don't have enough money to make sure that nobody goes homeless in this country? Why do we have enough money to make sure that all of our legislators have free health care for their entire lives and personal private security for their entire lives, when we don't have enough money to make sure that no one in this country can literally be too poor to live? That is a shame, because from my perspective and my philosophy and my politics, you measure the worth of a country by how it treats its most vulnerable and less protected citizens. If the people on the bottom are struggling, the whole country is suffering. And if one single person in this country is fighting and struggling for food and water, then the whole freaking country is failing. That's how I feel. So when we talk about how to bridge these gaps, the way that I feel we should bridge them is by asking people to lean in a little bit to that selfishness. And rather than asking them, are your neighbors minorities? We need to be asking them, hey, can you feed your kids? Why not? Because that high horse up there looks awful freaking tasty, right? That's how I see it. And then when people start to take care of themselves a little bit better, they'll be able to reach out and take care of their communities a little bit better. When people realize that they are the ones on the ground paving the roads, building the bridges, building the schools, financing the fire department, they are the people who are keeping food on their own table. They are the people who bring their friends and neighbors into their house when they don't have enough. They are the people who love and care for each other. When they stop pitting black against white, when they stop pitting straight against gay, when they stop pitting cis against trans, when they stop pitting us against each other and forcing the poor to hate the even more poor, we will all be able to realize just how much we hate the people in power. And that is when change will happen.
Amen, Reverend.
With that, I've got to start wrapping up, but I hope that if there's one thing that you've learned from all of this, is actually a great way to tie this in. None of your problems are left versus right issues. All of your problems are top versus bottom issues. And I hope that you keep that in mind moving forward, because our nature as a species, or our history as a species, has been a lot of class struggle. And as long as we are fighting a culture war instead of a class war, the upper class wins. It's my point.
Thank you, Forrest.